All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm doing another broadcast to cover some topics that I did not have a chance to broach the other night. So I'm going to begin with the announcement of a new Lord of the Rings film. No, it's not the War of the Rohirrim, that animated prequel to the trilogy that's coming out. I'm talking about The Hunt for Gollum. So Peter Jackson is returning to the franchise as a producer in a more meaningful way than he was with Amazon's abysmal attempt at covering parts of Tolkien that Jackson didn't have the rights to. And the events that they're going to be covering, I'll be from the Fellowship of the Ring, have already been broached before. There was a fantastic fan film many years ago, titled the same, and it covered the same events where Aragorn and Gandalf went to hunt down Gollum right before the Fellowship, was assembled. And that's the beauty of Tolkien's work is when you go through and find all these little subplots and events in the appendices, they open up to such great storytelling possibilities. The Hobbit trilogy, for instance, was a point of controversy because of how they stretched the narrative out into three films. And while I admit there could have been some truncations that would have been beneficial to the overall story, I do enjoy that they adapted the appendices and the parallel plot lines whole hog. Now, we can sit here and argue about the execution of it till the cows come home, but what I'll default to is that it was a pretty satisfying handling of the White Council business. The inner nerd in me just enjoyed that and thought the execution was solid. There's some great foreshadowing of Saruman's corruption, and just by and large, the tension, direction, and design for the Dol Guldur business is just fantastic. And so I think, Jackson looking at Amazon having its billion-dollar failure at live action Tolkien realizes that he has the chance to, take on this curator role like Kevin Feige before the MCU sucked and really help get Tolkien's live action works to get to new heights and reach new audiences without compromising it for phantom audiences. And this opens up the inevitable question about franchises, sequels, spin-offs, prequels. When do we end films? So I fell into a rabbit hole about a year ago. I was brushing up on my knowledge on trademark law because I took a few IP law classes when I went through to get my graduate coursework done, and I went down a specific rabbit hole on Dick Tracy. So Warren Beatty owns the trademark to Dick Tracy, and there haven't been any new adaptations because he's been the sole holder of it and has refused to, license it out or work with anybody on it. And I kept thinking about, well, why is it that, we have Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, Jurassic Planet films spanned out at such a regular interval? Why is he not beholden to, make these live action efforts? Well, turns out he does. So trademark law dictates that by the end of every 10 years, and now here's the thing, before I dive into this, I might be misremembering some details or forgetting things or whatever. I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm just going from my common man's knowledge on it. And if there's stuff I'm missing, please let me know. Conversations are great, and I don't pretend to be infallible. I'm human as everybody else. But from what I recollect, it's that you have to create new content to hold a trademark for every 10 years. So a trademark applies to a specific product. So if I have a trademark on Dick Tracy, I have to make sure I specify that this specific trademark is for, live action films. And it turns out that Warren Beatty has been creating live action Dick Tracy films. Now you'll go, how come I haven't seen them? Where have they been released? Well, he has created these little interviews that he dresses up in character as Dick Tracy and releases them on either Turner Classic Movies or one of the vintage platforms in the odd hours of the night when the renewal date's up. The most recent one he did, I think, was called Dick Tracy Zooms In, where he dressed in character and did a half-baked Zoom call answering some questions that meet the minimum runtime of it being considered a feature film. It satisfies the trademark requirements, so he's good for another 10 years. So you can do efforts as low-key as, these little Zoom calls in character that nobody will ever see, because let's be honest, who's staying up till 3 in the morning to watch Turner Classic Movies or whatever classic platform that is? I'm not. But he still gets to hold on to the trademark and such. Now, Hollywood looks on the other side of this angle of, oh, well, we have to go and spam out these films every few years. So we're having remakes, prequels, sequels, spin-offs. And so where do you find a balance with all this? Well, I think, looking at, we have a body of work like Tolkien's, and you have the full license to it. You can address and tease out the events that Jackson didn't have the time to cover in his trilogy. The Hunt for Gollum's a great chapter, and I think they can do it to great success, especially with Andy Serkis returning. I will also add that, if you look at the Fellowship alone, there's a lot of plot lines that were buried. You could explore the fall of Moria, especially because during the Council of Elrond, there's a very poignant moment where one of the dwarves broaches that, Mordor sent emissaries to Moria, reaching out, trying to establish a friendship. The dwarves refused, and then, the whole fall of Moria happened short afterwards, where, as you had the devil knocking on your doorstep asking for an alliance, said no, no, and then bad things happened because they held their ground. And honestly, I was thinking about how would you address the fall of Moria as a film? I know it'd be a 3-hour film, so just with this thought experiment, how would you do this? There's two ways, and it all depends on the tone. And to that, I'm going to default to the Alien franchise in my metaphor. You can do a slow burn horror film that hits its peak, much like Alien. You could just focus off the repelling the waves of the goblins, and then have the Balrog as the xenomorph equivalent at the end, the source of the dread, the final monster. And you could tame it to PG sensibilities. Or, if you wanted to, you could create a adrenaline-laced action horror film like Aliens. And I think audiences would be receptive to the dwarves, and you could really, capture some great aesthetic, choreography, and even just a soundtrack, just because I discovered that dwarf metal's become a new thing. So the options you have for capturing that in a successful way and making it relevant are endless. But I would say there'd be one of two ways to take on one event that was not covered in Jackson's near encompassing adaptation. So that's why I look forward to seeing The Hunt for Gollum. There's a lot of potential. And, as long as, Jackson's overseeing it, I think you could see that there could be some continuity with the aesthetic design, locations, and all of that. And I think that kind of cohesion would be good, where each director could have their own flourishes, but there's still some kind of internal consistency, much like the MCU before it sucked. But anyway, that's The Hunt for Gollum. Now, the next time I want to talk about, I broached trademark law and all that. One of the other things I want to talk about is, public reception and interaction with creators. King of the Hill has a reboot on the horizon, and ever since Johnny Hardwick passed away, this question is, what are they going to do? And I've been thinking about this because the best metaphor I can have is, because think about this. Hardwick voiced Dale Gribble, who was one of the key characters on the show. He was also a writer and a producer, and I think he helped oversee running some seasons. Don't quote me on that one. I got to fact check, but I know he had extended capacity as the time went on with the seasons. Losing him was equivalent to the Beatles losing John Lennon and having this decision of, what do we do? Do we still keep going? And I know the circumstances were not identical, but I'm just trying to illustrate the point that the harmony of Mike Judge, Johnny Hardwick, and the others, created this unreplaceable dynamic. And so what do you do when you lose one of those pillars? Obviously you can replace him, but the question is, do you retire the character of Dale, keep him going, recast him? I don't know what the best ethics is for the situation. I just know that tonally, narratively, the show is not going to be the same, because you're A, accounting for Dale's absence, or changes, but also B, Hardwick's absence because of the unique flavor he brought to the show. During lockdown, I enjoyed the vignettes and songs he performed on his Rusty Shackelford YouTube channel. Especially when the peak of lockdown brought all this despair and everything being cooped up inside. It was nice seeing him going, in disguise as the alter ego of one of his characters, playing songs like Pocket Sand in the vein of Rockin' Man. And so I bring this up because fan content has a great way of filling the void when stuff is missing. I don't know if you've been on Facebook or even seen some of the reels, but I stumbled across one for Propane Man Confidential by a gentleman who does these little vignettes as Hank Hill. He shoots it on a little wooden fence like the King of the Hill intro, and gives these little monologues as Hank Hill. He looks the part and he sounds the part. But the best part is the writing really addresses how to broach, King of the Hill, which managed to keep things politically balanced back in the day and bringing it towards the interesting times that we live in, all these new topics and societal changes and such. And it's a risky gambit, however you cut it, because, you're flashing forward to a whole new iteration of society, how these characters want to react, and et cetera, et cetera. But the authenticity and heart that's brought to Propane Confidential is just incredible. If you haven't checked out those vignettes, I highly recommend them. It's one of the few fan streaming products that I actively enjoy. And even if they never figure out what to do with the partially completed new season of King of the Hill, I'm okay with Propane Confidential just because of the authenticity, heart, and charm it brings to it. So if you have a chance to check them out, I highly recommend it. It's one of the few fan works that are really meaningful. And especially because, trying to capture the tone and tenor of the original writing. About this past year, our church, we actually invited a group of evangelists to come through. And this family was a great, in many ways. But the father, he did this tribute to Don Knotts' Barney from Mayberry. And, he gave these little monologues, these little vignettes about, what Mayberry looked like in 2024. And the writing was consistent. The tone was great. And it was just a nice way to sort of see how these timeless characters could be transplanted into the modern day. Now, obviously, we never get a modern Andy Griffith, nor should we. But the point being, fan works are a great way to help embody the characters. And fan culture itself is a very sublime thing whenever people internalize these characters that they have this vicarious ownership over and bring them into new light and new generations. And so I'm going to say TLDR, watch Propane Man Confidential. You won't regret it. It's awesome. Next item on the list. So speaking of fan works, I often get in discussions with friends on live action franchises, especially Batman. And the question is, who is the best Joker? And I asked the question is by which parameters are you defining the best live action Joker? Now, I can make this a whole 3-hour discourse, but I'll keep it quick. The best comic accurate Joker is Jack Nicholson. Now, Heath Ledger was the best modern Joker, and the comics piggybacked off what Nolan did in making the Joker a domestic terrorist without motivation who embodied the rhetoric and all of our anxieties. And the comics have done that, especially a bit under Scott Snyder's tenure. But the pre-Dark Knight Joker that was best comic accurate was Nicholson in Burton's film. And, sorry, next locking up there. Heath Ledger, the best postmodern Joker. But the most horrifying one is in a fan film. If you ever have a chance to watch Batman Dead End, you will see Andrew Koenig, and there's a tragic end to his tenure as the Joker in real life, which kind of paralleled Heath Ledger's in some ways. But what happened is, in the film, it's a crossover between the Joker, the Alien franchise, and Predator. Not going to spoil it. It's a short one, but it's the first appearance of, Batman wearing the cloth costume from, Miller's time, year one. The lighting was fantastic. You got to see a nice battle scene, but Koenig's dynamic of the Joker was pure Morrison from Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious earth. Just the pure dread, the nastiness. It was horrifying. And even one of my friends back at the time who, watched as many desensitizing horror films as I had, even he finished watching the short and said that was messed up. That's going to haunt me. So if you ever have a chance to watch it, do it, and you will see the most horrifying, foul, nightmarish Joker imaginable. Koenig was able to tap into his own inner demons to bring them to use on screen, and it shows, and it's tragic what happened to him. So continuing on with this on fan reactions, this brings me to my next topic. So I recently launched another book. So this is not under my Yapuka Nights verse that I write under my show name of Rob Free. This is a new book I've written under my government name, Joel Freen. And it's called The Racetown Detective Club, Book 13, Sasquatch Hollow. You can find it on Indiegogo. Now, based on audience feedback, there was a lot of, especially with some of the buyers I've had, lack of satisfaction with the pre-order process. They just wanted to order right away. I had to facilitate a lot of local pickups, which was fine with me. But I was trying to experiment with the storefront where I could have the money taken out, had a point of sale, documented and all that, and help organize the orders. Which is why, for this new franchise and my branding purposes, I launched it on Indiegogo, although I will probably launch it. I'm thinking about it on a separate campaign on Kickstarter later this year. I grew up reading the Hardy Boys books. The first one I had was The Case of the Yellow Feather. It was the one that my dad read. I enjoyed it. And then I went through and read the original 65 Hardy Boys novels. Now, depending on which series you read and how you count them all, they go up to 100 something on the new ones. But the original ones were to 65, then went up to 99, and then it went up to 100 something, and then they rebooted it, and I haven't paid attention since. And so the Hardy Boys books are a series that I reread at least once every 2 years. I just enjoy the structure, the small town noir, the locales, the imagery, and they're satisfying reads. There's no real sense of internal continuity, other than just the bland serialization, but it's great. They're timeless adventures, and it was something that stayed with me, especially because Racetown Lake, the setting of my novel, evoked a lot of Barmet Bay from the Hardy Boys, and some of the outlying lands evoked some of the similar locales. Bayport was created as the every town, everyone's small town, even though it was modeled off a small one in New York by the Seaway. But I'm pretty sure it was a Seaway. You can fact check me on that. The point being, it was a town that everybody could relate to. And so for me, when I read those books, I just filled the geography with the corresponding features from where I lived. And that's why the books took on a new life for me. Now, living near Racetown Lake, the one thing, is that it's a tourist beacon. People travel from Texas to go up here because there's no private lakes in Texas. And even those who come from nearby states like Jersey say that doesn't hold a candle to what you got here. I remember this when I worked at the lake and got to talk with visitors from all over stateside, and even a gentleman from Germany who said that the lakes they had were unrivaled, which blew my mind. Now, it's all subjective, but just to hear that kind of rhetoric and just sort of ingrain it on something I take for granted, it was mind-blowing. So the idea for this book came about because I've been interested in cryptids, and Sasquatch has been on the top of the list. And I just wanted to tell a Hardy Boys-esque tale, but I kind of wanted to show the evolution of them, because if you read them growing up, they modernized with the times. One of the favorite books that I enjoyed when they set in the present was how they took on the Magic the Gathering and the Pokemon trading card craze, and set it on a criminal ring involving forged cards and all that. But I also went to read the parallel series they had for order readers called The Case Files, where the Hardy Boys got injected into the high-octane action hero world of 1980 cinema. And the first book ends up with Ayala, one of the boys' girlfriends, getting blown up in a car. And so having just those tensions brought into it, and then having the government contact Gray Man, who may or may not have been deep-throated, and all these things about brainwashing, government conspiracies, and having the boys wielding Uzis and jumping out of airplanes. I mean, I laughed at it, but I just felt like there hadn't been a transition. You go from solving jewel rings and small town, led by these thieves, to domestic and international terrorists with $1 million state-of-the-art equipment. And it's like, there should have been a tale that bridged this instead of just having it be, them getting exploded into a new world in the Bayport parking lot mall. So I've had this desire to write one of those books for a while, just growing. And I knew the structure of them, the tone, the reading level, the pacing, and all that, because I reversed engineered it, because I had an elementary school dream of writing my own. And I realized going in time that, the optics of having to maintain high-profile IP properties means that you don't get to have the full creative control you want, and there's market interest and internal politics, but I still wanted to do it. And I've had a deepening interest in Bigfoot, especially just looking at how Pennsylvania itself is ingrained in Bigfoot history, and bringing in my lifelong love of the lake, having hunted, fished, picnicked, traveled, and brought my electric boats out there. It's an integral part, of living in Pennsylvania, our lakes, because I think we have like over 1,000 of them, I don't know the exact number, but and then I just had a spark of an idea that had all these ideas coalesced together. I was driving back home one night up on this one mountain we have, and we were climbing up on the crest of the hill, and we had a coy wolf jump in front of our car. We nearly hit it. It was just sitting there, looked at us, and then ran off into the underbrush. So coy wolves are the PA coyotes that traveled up to Canada, mated with the wolves up there, came back down. We have a subspecies that emerged, a little larger, and has a pronounced wolfish profile, but most of the coyote tells. And for me, that kind of moment, nearly hitting a creature that was transplanted out of from seemingly another world, right? Canada or the Arctic, seeing it there in the darkness and on the mountain, it clicked, and I thought, that could be any kind of creature that could really run with. What could I do? And Bigfoot came into the fray. And so I wanted to tell an ecological mystery involving Bigfoot, kind of the way the X-Files broached it with Darkness Falls in the later episode at Detours, so that you could show some concerns environmentally and some issues, but not take a political side or a stance, just to sort of show all dynamics and allow the reader to fill in the blanks themselves. And so I went and built this thriller up, and I took all I learned from reverse engineering and my love of the Hardy Boys books and created a mystery thriller. It's labeled Book 13. Books 1 through 12 haven't been written yet. If there's market interest, I'll write the first 12. But I created this Book 13 as a transition point from small town noir to going into the supernatural. The Hardy Boys go from solving crime and into the supernatural. So in my case, it's the son of a FBI consultant and college student and his girlfriend who go and solve these different mysteries. I wanted to create a different dynamic where they were kind of already in a relationship, so we didn't have to go through all the developing romance. I did this with my preceding novel, The Heart of the Dragon, which you can buy off Amazon. And what I elected to do was just sort of see their world change from going from, blue collar and occasional white collar criminals to having to deal with something beyond the fringe of science. I did my best to ground it. I did a lot of research on the best way to make this as realistic as possible, even though I know I'm stretching the elastic bands of genre convention and narrative realism and such. I also soaked in the geography of the lake and the outlying areas. So anybody who's vacationed to Racetown, the areas, you'll recognize a lot of familiar landmarks. So Trough Creek, the hanging bridge there, it's a key setting in one of the later chapters. We have the bridge by the resort and just a few other areas that if you're keen enough, you'll recognize, especially some of the little towns that populate the book. And it's my love letter to growing up near them in the outlying areas and just capturing what it's like to live near, these old woods, which are replants, right? The lumber industry and everything else came through, took them down. So we're looking at descendant trees, but they still hold secrets and memories. What can you build from that? What other things were hidden and still surviving, waiting for their moment to surface? So, and plus the area where, it's said is populated with cryptids. We got Racetown Ray, who really didn't hit the radar till the late thousands, well after the inception of the lake, which was in the 70s, part of the Nixon administration's stateside tourism renewal project. And so I acknowledge some of the lake's history there too, and do my best to make it authentic with the lore of Sasquatch and acknowledging PA's unique history of it. We don't really have any documented sightings of Bigfoot in the Huntington area. There's a decent amount of dogman sightings throughout going to Juniata Valley, and that's something I'm tapping into the next book, the PA Dogman. But for this one, I wanted to set it locally with the areas I knew well, but also bring in one of my favorite cryptids. Where would Sasquatch be found in Racetown Lake? And if he did so surface, how would my dedicated detectives try to figure out what caused him to arrive? Where had he been hiding beforehand? What had changed? And so forth. So I took reader feedback on creating a new point of sale thing, so the money goes out right away, but the nice organization of Indiegogo allows me to still maintain sales and records. Now, obviously, the caveat of Indiegogo is that it's not like the all or nothing nature of Kickstarter. It's just that it doesn't have the internal marketing and all that. You have to pay for that out of pocket for third party marketing to reach other vendors and other sites. And so it's a unique challenge of me. The book is still going to meet its goal. I'm just hoping to try to at least get to a decent threshold of sales. I already have the editor lined up, so the book will be edited and published this summer. It's just a matter of me just trying to get some extra, money to offset that, so I could really ensure the best quality of everything. The book's still going to happen regardless, but as a businessman, liking to and add some new readers to the fold. The book's also a tie-in book to my first novel, The Heart of the Dragon. They exist in the same universe, and in fact, two of the protagonists or the heroes from The Heart of the Dragon appear in my novel and help the heroes on the tail end when they're bringing down the villain. So there's some nice connectivity between the two books. You don't have to have read The Heart of the Dragon to appreciate them, but they're there just to help make the world more cohesive and rewarding for readers. And this is all part of me making what I call the Frantheon. It's my pantheon of heroes I created under my family-friendly Joel Frayne banner. I wanted to tell mass entertainment that sort of was, all ages welcome storytelling after having written a lot of novels for fans of Stephen King and George Martin and those kind of dynamics. I wanted to make more family-friendly fare. So that's why I've created Sasquatch Hollow. And I'm going to be doing a marketing and promotional campaign after its publication and printing that I'm going to try to bring to some different events and things to sell. But it's nice for me to take reader feedback and implement what I learned from the franchise perspective. And so the Frantheon will be continued one book at a time. I have some more stories lined up, but I just got to meter out to see what the reception of this book is. Is it going to be a one-off? Well, it's not going to be a one-off because I'm already writing the sequel. It's at least going to be a couple book cycle because the next one is going to tackle the Dog Man. One and after that will either be Racetown Ray or the Broad Top Snake. And so there's at least 3 more after this. But beyond that, I will look at the success, whether to continue this franchise or not. And it's something that I'll still probably keep telling, but at a relaxed pace if there's not a lot of market interest. At best, right now, my writing endeavors are a hobby, and I'm grateful for that. I'm glad that it's not my source of bread, my mana, I'm glad to be able to tell the stories that I do and have a persistent audience that enjoys my work and stories. It's what helps me keeps my childhood dreams of being a storyteller alive. Anyway, that's about all I got for now. I just wanted to cover all these just because I found the live stream format's been great for me maintaining the channel, giving updates, and so forth. So have a good day.